All right. Let's give it up for Christopher.
It never ceases to amaze me. I sit up here and then I turn around and look out there and, wow, would you come down? I'm going to start coming really late. You know, Phil and I work in the same building, and I think it was Wednesday he was in the office and I came down because sometimes I have to reheat my coffee because, you know, I like it to be a certain temperature. And I go by, I said, how are you doing, Phil? He says, great, we're going to go on a vacation. I said, cool, who's going to be at church? And he looked at me. And I said, oh yeah, it's the first Sunday. I completely spaced it. It happened. Friday, was it Friday? Friday I was asked to go to New Horizon High School and speak to the boys there. And what they did this past weekend, they had a program going all week long. And they were trying to focus on healthy living and healthy attitude and how to be a healthy man, you know, and for the women, how to live with respect for themselves. So they asked me to come in and speak for an hour to the boys. So I'm saying to myself, what am I going to speak about? I always have that dilemma. So I got there and I decided to speak about easy money. Now, if you're a roaring 20s buff, you would know who Easy Money was. Easy Money was the lawyer for Al Capone. Okay? And the reason why they called him Easy Money is because he was a brilliant lawyer. He got Al Capone out of a lot of fixes, out of a lot of messes. And of course, Al Capone took very good care of Easy Money. He had this great big mansion to live in. It was about the size of a whole city block in Chicago, which was quite the thing in that particular time and day. Well, Easy Money also had a son, and even though Easy Money kind of lived a very shady life, you know, he tried to instill in his son really positive traits. And as he went through his life, he started feeling like he wasn't really leaving for his son the type of a legacy that he wanted to really leave for his son. So he turned on the mom, went to the feds, and he kind of, as they say in the 20s, he spilled his guts. Okay. Well, what it got him was shot down about a year later in the streets of Chicago because the mob, you know, they paid their debt, that kind of thing. I told them the story about Easy Money because I wanted to tell them also a story about the first flying ace in World War II, who his last name happened to be O'Hare. And what happened was he had left from the aircraft carrier with his squadron, and they were on a mission. And he knew, he looked at his gauge in his plane, and he saw that they didn't top off the airplane full of fuel. So he knew he couldn't get all the way to the target zone and back to the ship. So his squadron leader told him to go back to the ship. So he's flying back to the ship, and he runs across a squadron of Japanese fighter planes. He's too far away from his squadron to get word back to them, and he doesn't want to lead the Japanese to the fleet because that's kind of where they were headed. So what he decides to do is attack the Japanese squadron. He shoots down 5 planes, runs out of bullets, and still harasses the squadron trying, you know, to knock their wings off, those kinds of things. Finally, the Japanese squadron gave up and they head off in a different direction, and he kind of cripples into the aircraft carrier, lands. There's a camera on his plane, so they were able to see everything that happened. Here's the interesting thing. He is the son of Easy Money. Okay, he's the son of Easy Money. And what they did, because he had received the Medal of Honor and he was the first World War II flying ace, they named the O'Hare Airport in Chicago after him. So if you're in the O'Hare Airport, there is a memorial there on him, and it's really interesting story. Before I get on, this young man up here was playing the flute when I came in this morning, and it was divine. Thank you. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. So, I had this wonderful conversation with these boys, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to talk about here this morning? And I remembered this story about a young man who had received an inheritance of a lot of money. I mean, he had a lot of money from his deceased parents. And so he was spending it like water. And he got all of these friends, and he was just having a great time, partying all the time, just staying out late at night, just doing anything he wanted to do, no problem. And then it happened. One day he woke up, his money was gone. He had spent it all. And when the money left, the friends left. So here he is now, down on his luck, down on himself, and he's standing on a bridge, looking out into the water, contemplating suicide. And he's just getting ready to put his hands up on the bridge railing there, getting ready to climb up when he hears someone coming, walking across the bridge. It's like the shuffle of sandals. How's that? Hear me okay back there? All right. I like to check. And he turns and he sees it's a monk, okay, dressed in, monk gown, walking his way, and he walks directly to him. And he says, "Why are you trying to kill yourself?" And the young man, he goes, "How do you know I was going to do that?" The monk just smiles and he says, "Look, why don't you travel with me for a year, and I'll introduce you to my master, and I'm sure he can help you find your purpose in life again." So the young man goes, what the heck? I got nothing to lose. I lost everything already. So he follows this monk around for a year, and he sees all kinds of things. He sees the hungry, he sees people having a hard time, he sees people that are caring, he sees all of these wonderful things. And he sees the upside of life, the downside of life. It's just amazing. He knows what it's like to go hungry, he knows what it's like to have people feed him. All these wonderful and up and down types of things happen. And then one day, the monk that he's been walking around with says, Today, the master's coming. You'll get to meet the master, and I'm sure he'll make you one of his disciples." So sure enough, they go into this temple, and there's the master. He's sitting there, and all of these devotees are all around. And this young man walks up to him, and he says, "Master, I want to be one of your disciples." And the master looks at him, and he says, "Oh, what have you done with your life?" And the young man is taken aback. He hadn't thought about being asked, "What have I done with my life?" No one ever asked him that question before. He had to really think about, how do I answer, what have I done with my life? And he really couldn't think of anything. And he said, "Well, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head." So the master looks at him and he says, "Well, what are you good at?" The young man thought to himself, he said, "Well, all the things that I was good at weren't really very healthy. I was good at partying, I was good at spending money, I was good at just running around and doing this and doing that. I really didn't do anything. He said, ah. And the master goes, well, is there at least one thing you're good at? Your whole life, one thing, just one thing that you're good at. The young man scratches his head. He says, well, I'm pretty good at playing chess. The master sits up straight and he says, looks over to one of his disciples, he says, bring me a chess set. I want it right here. And I need one of you to volunteer and play this young man a game of chess. And then the master looks at the young man and he said, I'm going to give you a test. And I want to see just how good you are at playing this game of chess. But I'll tell you this. If you lose, I'll chop your head off. And the young man goes, well, I was going to commit suicide anyway. So he agrees. There's a little stipulation. The loser, be it the young man or the young disciple who volunteered to play the young man, would also lose his head if he lost. So there they are. There's the chess set. How many of you in here play chess? It's an interesting game of strategy. It's a very interesting game of strategy. So there they are, the chess set, the young man, the young disciple, and the game begins. There's a couple of moves that most of you that really understand it and have played chess for a while, there's a couple of traditional moves that can be made. And when those traditional moves are made, you know right away how to start to counter those things and make adjustments. And then there's those that haven't played chess before. And the young disciple that volunteered, he knew a little bit, but he really wasn't that good of a chess player. And the young man started to figure it out really, really quickly. And he was making some moves, and he could see that he had gotten the game to a point where in probably the next 4 or 5 moves, he was going to win the game. And then he started thinking. He went, oh. And he looked across at the young disciple that he was playing. He goes, if I win, he's going to lose his life. Oh. That changes things for me. He's young. He has a whole life in front of him. He hasn't done the things that I've done. He hasn't made the mistakes that I've made. I don't know. So what he does, he makes a decision. He makes a decision and he starts moving differently. And he deliberately changes the course of the game so he'll lose. And there's probably 2 moves left. The master can look down, he's been watching the whole time, and he looks down and can see that the young disciple's going to win the game. And he puts his hands up and he says, stop. Bring me my sword. And another disciple brings him his sword. He pulls the sword out. And he takes the sword like this and he says, I can see who's going to win and who's going to lose this game. And he brings it back like this and he goes, brings it down with all his might and he cuts the board in half. Cuts the board in half. And then he looks at the young man and he said, you know, you've demonstrated 2 things while you played this game. And because of that, I'm going to take you on as a disciple. And the young man looks at her and goes, wow, what did I demonstrate? I don't know, what did I do? And the master looks at him and he said, the two things you demonstrated for me was focus and compassion. And those were the two things that were important to me if you were going to be one of my disciples. Focus and compassion. Those two things. So, you know, when I talk about things like this, when you talk about focus and you talk about compassion, what is your focus? What do you focus on daily? What are you passionate about? I want to share with you something that we all got in kindergarten. For those of you that don't know, my daughter, one of my daughters, I have 3 daughters, is living with us with my son-in-law and my grandson, who's 5. His name is Christopher Michaels. He's named after his 2 grandfathers, myself and his other grandfather. They're building a house, so they're with us. So I have the pleasure of seeing this little 5-year-old running around every single day in my house, and he's also in kindergarten. So my daughter is helping out, and I'm hearing all of these things that they're doing in kindergarten. And I went, wow. So I started remembering back. I can still remember, you know, they say as we get older, a long-term memory comes back, short-term out the window. Well, I can remember back some of that stuff. But let me share with you some stuff about kindergarten, because this is out of the book, out of Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. How many of you read that? All right, so this will be a delight for those who have read it. Those who haven't, hold on to your seats. Most of what I really need to know about how to live life and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduation school mountain, but there in the sandbox in nursery school. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt someone. Wash your hands before you eat. You love this next one. Flush. Warm cookies and milk are good for you unless you're lactose and wheat intolerant, which we can get a substitute for you then. Okay. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some, and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work some every day. It gets better. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch for traffic. Amen. Hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the plastic cup? The root goes down, the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we're all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, even so do we. But remember the book Dick and Jane? How many of you remember the... Oh, yeah. And the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, L-O-O-K, look. Everything you need to know is there somewhere if you look. The golden rule and love, basic salutations, economics, politics, and sane living. Think of what a better world it would be if we all, the whole world, had cookies and milk about 3 o'clock every afternoon and then laid down with a blanket for a nap.
Oh, yeah.
I like that world.
It's only about 4 hours away. Or if we had a basic policy in our nation to always put things back where we found them and clean up our own messes. And it's still true no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it's best to hold hands and stick together. How about that? You know, I have found over the years that it seems that the greatest truths are hidden in the simplest things. And it's many, many times we take things for granted. Most of you have seen my wife. Every once in a while she'll go with me someplace. I'm in so many things and I've dragged her to so many places. She says, honey, you go. I go, okay. But last night we were at the CBC Foundation dinner. And it's really interesting because my lovely wife has a lot of food allergies. And I mean a lot of food allergies. So what I did is I went over to the Red Lion and I talked to the Major D who was taking care of everything and made sure she would have a meal that she could eat. And they did a fantastic job. And I was so impressed with how wonderfully they did the work that later today I plan on going over there and taking some flowers to the lady who made that happen. Now, there's nothing that says I have to do that, but I know what will happen if I do that, and it's just a little thing, but the impact that it will have is huge. If you can do a little something, see this wonderful lady right here? See that plant over there? I'm sitting here this morning, she comes in and puts a plant there. And you know, every morning that I'm here, she comes in and puts a plant there. And I looked at her and I said, you do that every Sunday, don't you? And she says, yes, my thing. But it's a little thing, but it's a beautiful thing. And it's those kinds of things that I'm talking about. That sometimes we see them. Remember kindergarten, the biggest word, L-O-O-K, look. We see them, but do we see them? And sometimes it's the people that are the closest to us. We don't see it. We don't look. So take a moment, hold hands, stick together, and really appreciate those that are in your inner circle, those that are close to you, those that say hi to you in the morning, those that are in your world, okay? All of the people that do the little teeny things that make our life what it is, make all the difference in the world. I'll leave you with a prayer. And since I had done the O'Hare Airport, I'm kind of a history buff too. I like to read about things in history. And I found a prayer that was written in World War II. It's called the Doughboy Prayer. And I thought it was beautiful. So I'm going to close with it. The supreme prayer of my heart is not to be rich, famous, powerful, or too good, but to be radiant. I desire to radiate health, calm courage, cheerfulness, and goodwill. And I love cell phones. You never know what kind of ring they're going to have. I wish to live without hate, jealousy, envy, or fear. I wish to be simple, honest, frank, natural, clean in mind, and clean in body, unaffected, ready to say, I don't know. If it is to be, and to meet all men with absolute equality. To face any obstacle and meet every difficulty unafraid. I wish others to live their lives to and up to their fullest and to their best. And to that end, I pray that I might never meddle, interfere, dictate, give advice that is not wanted, or assist when my services are not needed. If I can help people, I will do it by giving them a chance to help themselves. And if I can uplift or inspire, let it be by example and suggestion rather than by injunction and dictation. That is to say, I desire to be radiant, to radiate light. That's a doughboy prayer. World War I. That's an interesting time in history for this type of a person to write a prayer like this. So I leave you with all those thoughts that I had floating around in my head this morning. And I hope that those that are close, that you look, L-O-O-K, at them, okay? And all the wonderful little simple things that they do that really make your life wonderful, because it truly is. God bless. Namaste.